right, good morning. Sorry to get started a minute late, but I will now call to order our July meeting of our Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. Do I have any citizens to be heard this morning? Well, one at a time, not all four. Okay. All right. If you would give us your name and who you represent.
We'll be glad to. My name is,
okay.
Pardon? My name is Debbie Blackburn.
Okay.
I'm a board member of OnTrack. Our board president couldn't be here today. He's on vacation. He has met with the property owner at the request of City Council to talk about these issues. I would say I'm also, because of my interest in a larger regional transit system, a member of the streetcar committee for MAPS 3. So I am very interested in a system that works and fits together. One of the things that has been done is a hub study that ACOG undertook to study where the hub should be, where a transit hub should be that could service all these needs. The Santa Fe Depot was the place that was chosen, and the study was done on the basis of whether there was necessary track and platform capacity, commuter rail connectivity, and the ability to avoid, importantly, the freight trains that go through that particular area. Santa Fe was chosen precisely because there is expansion room on the east side of the tracks. The connectivity would be through the spur on the property, and the spur is necessary because it services the passenger tracks on the outside platform and keeps it out of the way of the traffic, and it wouldn't have to cross the freight lines. If the study that you're about to undertake about the private property with the parking garage was done, it would have an impact. It would mean that the trains could only so-called back in, back out. This would have a negative impact on having a system that could work, because it has to be based on entry and exit times, delay times, and it just would cut off the Midwest City Tinker ability to go that way, also a possible adventure line to the Adventure District, the zoo and so forth. It would, we would have to wait on the freight trains, and this has already been determined in a study that's already been done. I think there's been some confusion about the fact that the only reason this doesn't work is because it affects high-speed rail, and that is not the case. The case is that it would affect commuter rail more, whether it could operate out of that hub or not, and we have determined that that is going to be our intermodal hub. All the other alternatives, anything possible that could be considered to have a regional hub and to allow it to take traffic back and forth to Midwest City and Tinker, were evaluated. There was no other alternative that was found that would accommodate this. Other than that, the tracks are where they are. Parking garages can be moved. In fact, I would say that part of the reason that this doesn't work is because primarily the way it is set up is the parking garage is sitting where it is, most of it is on private property rather than public property. And when the lease ran out with the city would be forced to buy that property back from the property owner in order to get the use of that property at the end of the lease. There are other ways to put that. There are other places in Bricktown. You cannot move the rail track lines. This has been studied. Another study, $18,000, half of it to come from the federal money that we're getting, that's just like throwing it out the window. If you go to the same consultants you've had before, which I know you were having a discussion when I walked in, I don't know if it related to that, they should come to the same conclusion. This is not the place for a parking garage right up next to the tracks that cuts off the spur that is a necessity for having commuter rail into the eastern part of Oklahoma County. I know there is a person who owns this land, and I would suggest openly that if you have to, that you talk about a land swap for this person. This is not the place to put this, and primarily the way he has it constituted so that most of it is on his private land and not on city land, which means that ultimately the city will have to buy back the lease. This is not an innocuous thing to vote on. This is duplicative at the very best. It is wasteful at the worst. It is short-sighted. And it is working for a private third party who does need to be considered, and like I said, the city should consider maybe a land swap. But there are other places to put this in Bricktown. You cannot move the tracks. The tracks are where they are. The spur is where it is. It would be so short-sighted to cut off that spur and leave no way to go into the eastern part of the county. No, backing up does not work because you have to operate at in conjunction with the freight trains, and you would maybe have to sit there for a long time. You wouldn't have a schedule that would be logical or would give you an effective commuter system. And if we are going to grow as a metropolitan area, we need to have commuter rail, and this is not about the possibility of high-speed rail. This is about simply having commuter rail to bring people who work in Oklahoma City or want to come into Bricktown and spend money to do that. This is more than one person. This is about Oklahoma City. This is about the region. So I would ask you not to vote to spend $18,000, which the Maps Committee Transit Maps Committee would love to have to do some work on EK Gaylord in preparation for making that hub operational, to do another study to placate someone. This is about the best use for the citizens of Oklahoma City. And I would ask you please to consider this before voting for throwing $18,000 more out the window. Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the initial study we did probably didn't take into account the location of this proposed garage, did it?
No. I mean, at that point in time, it wasn't a consideration,
So
at least as presented by the public sector.
And so the study we're talking about today, which that item has been pulled, but we will proceed to do a study because of the proposed garage. So the initial study did not take into account the possibility of the garage being there.
Excuse me, sir. It did take into consideration that spot where this proposed parking garage would be. It absolutely did. And that part is essential. That spur is essential to commuter rail. It absolutely did take into consideration that that spot does not need to be developed. It's duplicative. I mean, you can say, well, we didn't have any proposal for this, but they took into consideration that particular location that has the spur on it. That is not true. It has been done. It has been studied. That parcel of land is integral.
Just a clarification on that. The location that Mrs. Blackburn is talking about, clearly relative to the spur, was part of it. But what I understood you to ask is, was there a discussion about a parking garage being built at that location, and there certainly wasn't. In fact, as part of the hub study, the parking garage location that was identified as a potential site to support commuter rail and high-speed rail was actually located on the south side of Reno there, up against the train tracks. And later, as we did a downtown parking summit, and we were talking about the need for additional downtown parking, it became evident that when talking to building owners and leasing agents that the desirability of having a garage in the downtown area was probably higher if we were on the east side of the tracks rather than on going north up to 5th and 6th by Robinson. So we know where there's a desire for parking. Whether this works or not, obviously, is what we were looking at. But clearly, and that was what was part of the study, is to identify if there are other ways to get in there that would not necessarily inhibit the building of the garage, or come back with the decision that says absolutely it's going to inhibit the building of the garage or the track. And ultimately, it's city's council's decision as to which way they want to go.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Jeff Bezdek. I reside at my office at 1015 North Broadway, Suite 120 here in downtown Oklahoma City. I'm also a downtown property owner. I served on RTD1. Currently am involved in the current RTD process with ACOG, the Streetcar Alternatives Analysis Committee, and currently on the MAPS 3 Streetcar Subcommittee. I'm also the Education Director for the transit nonprofit, the Modern Transit Project. So I've attended many, many meetings, and I would like to add some additional clarity to what's being discussed today, because some of you look like maybe you know, maybe you don't know. Santa Fe Station, what you probably do know, was chosen out of, I believe it was 6 or 9 different sites downtown. And one of the major factors as to that location being preferred over the other options was because of its geographical location in the greater downtown area. It's very pedestrian friendly because of its relationship and proximity to the pedestrian core. We determined through the intermodal hub study that facility barely functions, barely works. It does function, and it works short of about 15 feet. But if the site were constrained further, it would be hard to establish that facility would serve our needs into the next few decades as hopefully commuter rail and additional rail comes online. And as you know, Amtrak currently goes to this facility. The elevated tracks, which are owned by Burlington Northern Santa Fe, were elevated during the WPA timeframe through a municipal bond, I believe, to allow traffic to flow freely without having to stop for trains passing through the area. This elevation requires a curving ramp that descends down into the area that's being discussed, the parking garage, to provide service to Tinker, Midwest City, Del City, future service to the Northeast Line up in Ward 7, and potentially high-speed rail, not high-speed rail as the Europeans know it. We're talking about higher speed Amtrak-type service to Tulsa if that should ever be established in the future. I'm here this morning because the issue at hand isn't the parking garage being factored into any of these studies. The issue is that these studies in replication established that curvilinear ramp was necessary for every function of rail transit to the northeast and east. There were some secondary options that were explored, and they were rated impractical and too costly. One being a circular ramp descending down over by the cottonseed mill, going around the facility and descending down onto the Union Pacific line. It was determined that that wouldn't be a very pleasurable ride experience, that would reduce efficiencies in terms of time efficiency to get to the hub and get to these other facilities, and the cost is prohibitive, and Union Pacific presented a major roadblock to building that south side ramp. So the issue at hand isn't whether the parking garage was studied in the context of these other studies. The issue is that you have an applicant or someone who is proposing a parking garage when these multiple studies have established that ramp is absolutely critical to providing that service. So I think the people that are here today are saying, why are we spending money studying something that we very firmly established, not through just Jacobs Engineering and the studies they've done, but also ODOT's high-speed rail analysis and URS, who is currently conducting the commuter rail corridor study, which presumably would end up with some of those same conclusions. So I'm here asking for conservation. We have very few corridors left where we can put rail service in the greater metropolitan area without extraordinary cost. And we're losing these incrementally. We're losing them. When the crosstown was rebuilt, a bridge wasn't designed spanning it to accommodate any kind of rail. And all we're talking about is land here. Now, the other context in terms of this Bricktown area is this ramp. It goes right through the parking garage location that's being discussed, but there is ample space to the east of this ramp, and there's ample space around the Bricktown Police Station that the city has control over that property that could function as a parking garage. Now, obviously the concern is that we want pedestrians to be able to easily access parking. But, I would say as a MAPS 3 streetcar committee member that's one reason why we're putting a streetcar in, to provide distribution of pedestrians over a broader area. So I don't understand why no one told Mr. Karchmer, no. We have all these studies, they established this. And I don't know if you got to watch the city council meeting, I believe it was a month ago, but they pretty much firmly established what their sentiment and policy is. Even the mayor came out and said this is not something that he could support, that the other council members could support building the garage in this location if it precluded building this infrastructure. So I just wanted to point out that it's not just Jacobs Engineering or the fixed guideway study, it's also the intermodal hub study, the ODOT high-speed rail corridor study, and presumably, again, the ongoing commuter rail study with URS. This ramp is duplicated in the exact same place in every study. And finally, one other thing. There are different ways of getting up to the elevation other than just this cottonseed mill. And as Debbie mentioned, Ms. Blackburn, one is a backup maneuver, where you pull up on the elevated and you reverse directions and go over to the Santa Fe station. Well, if I'm a commuter rail passenger, that really affects the time efficiency that I would experience trying to get to a future destination. Stopping on this elevated track, waiting for the engineer to reverse directions. So the beauty of the Santa Fe is not only is it barely functional in terms of this capacity issue, but it enables trains to pull through. So they never have to stop other than to pick up passengers and drop off passengers. They can keep on going. So you have the maximum flexibility that was established through this study for this facility. So we're disappointed that someone at some point did not tell Mr. Karchmer no. But nobody did. No one wanted to take on that responsibility. But the city council did do that. And why we would spend money to specifically evaluate the viability of trying to make something else work so that this gentleman can establish a parking garage on this specific location. Even though we do have a parking problem, that's undoubted. I'm sorry, but we have to say something. This is conservation.
First, I want to say that I did watch the city council meeting, and so I was very aware of what the city council said. But even the mayor, I don't think, said that we would not do this. And I think that what we heard was we would not eliminate the linkages. The linkages are critical. The discussion is at what cost. So we really need to get more information as a trust to evaluate what is the cost of alternatives, given that we have this parking garage proposal on the table. We as a trust have an obligation to provide parking. And so in the event that we have a proposer who has come forward and said, we would like to build parking, we're looking at a critical need for downtown parking. I realize you've talked about other locations in Bricktown. We're really not talking about Bricktown parking. We're talking about downtown parking. This location happens to provide us a close enough access, taking advantage of that streetcar route that we think does give us more alternatives. I want to be clear. None of us are thinking at any stage about not conserving those linkages. That's important to us. But we need to know if there's a cost of an alternative that previously was not cost-effective, but now becomes cost-effective as a result of a parking garage being part of the equation. We need information to consider that. And I don't think we have that in the study that we have so far. Now, I think the chairman mentioned, and probably you all are not aware, but this item is being pulled because of a question about Jacobs Consultancy being involved. But I think the study is still important to us. We probably need a set of fresh eyes to look at it. But again, the linkages are not on the table for us. It's how to preserve those linkages and whether or not we can still consider the parking garage.
Ms. Johnson, may I say that
Sure.
as a volunteer and someone who has gone to over 100 meetings at least, for me, this is that make or break moment where I see Cotpa as a problem where you have a conflict between transit and parking. I mean, you're having this debate about how do we serve both. And, you know, while I love my automobile and I enjoy my car, I think that this brings into rapid focus the forthcoming problems that this agency may have with a conflict between transit and service.
Because I think that we look at this as an integrated system where people park and then ride, whether it's riding a bus or riding a high-speed rail or riding commuter rail. But I think parking and transportation are integrally connected, and we don't think of it, I assure you the other board members do not think of it as an inherent conflict. We think of it as an opportunity to integrate those things together.
Okay, well then, I hope that if the money is spent, the conclusion comes to back up the studies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Kemper, I'm an Oklahoma City resident, have a small company, Kemper Consulting Group. I'm formerly urban design engineer for the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. I've been involved in these rail studies for the past well over 30 years on integrated rail and bus systems for central Oklahoma for mass transportation of all sorts. My concern is different, and I want to reiterate what Ms. Blackburn and Mr. Besdick said. They're absolutely correct, and conservation is a big issue. Oklahoma City historically has had a problem with destroying what we have. Whether it was the MI pay plan, there's just a lot that we do for the short term without looking at the long-term consequences. And I agree that there may be other alternatives to using the Bricktown spur or using the trestle. The problem is, if you look at some of the other cities around the country, they're envious of what we have. We have infrastructure that others don't have. As an example, the city of Houston is building a light rail system. They have paid an average of $1,367 per foot for right-of-way, per linear foot, $1,367 a foot for a total of $30 billion. Now, we don't know for sure when we're going to get commuter rail. We don't know for sure when high-speed rail. It may be 20 years from now. But what is the cost going to be if we destroy our infrastructure now? I think it has to be protected at all costs because, again, Oklahoma City has historically been too quick to kill off our infrastructure and what we have without looking at the long-term consequences. The connectivity is perfect at Santa Fe Station. And again, so many other cities would just love to be able to have what we have, and I think we got to approach this very, very carefully enough, and I hope to reinforce the studies. The studies were done, and I understand the need for pedestrian traffic, for vehicular traffic and parking. It's a critical issue. And other cities have faced the same problem, but we don't cure the problem by destroying what we have now. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Mark Gibbs, 601 North Broadway. I'm a member of the MAPS 3 Transit Committee and also recently appointed to the Downtown Stakeholder Committee for the Commuter Rail Alternatives Analysis. Marion Hutchinson, the President of OnTrack, couldn't be here today, but he prepared some comments, and I request that these be submitted. The Hub study was a very important study at a very crucial time and addressed a lot of very important issues that were of concern to the transit community. Sam Bowman, who was the City Council rep on the Hub Study Steering Committee, said about halfway through that he knew that there were concerns that the Hub study would be a whitewash of some kind. And he heard this concern from other senior regional leaders. Those senior regional leaders told him halfway through that it was not. They were very impressed with how the study was conducted and how technically thorough and complete it was. Also, further on into the study, I actually came up with the term future-proofing, probably much to Jacob's chagrin, but we were concerned that it was only looking at the limited corridors of the fixed guideway study and requested that it also include the Adventure Line, i.e. the Northeast Corridor, and the line to the airport, and proved that the system could work not just 30 years out, but 60 years out. And I think that lent a lot of, they went back and they did the work, and it lent a lot of credibility and to the whole study, a lot of transparency. So if for some reason we are supposed to revisit that, there is a very high hurdle to overcome. There is a very high need for a very thorough technical study that somehow will be able to override what were very, very thorough conclusions, as Marion has documented. If Jacobs is not going to be involved, then I would expect that someone of the calibre of Alan Zarit, a nationally recognised rail hub expert who is out of the Jacobs Dallas office, should be involved. And any conclusions would need to define in detail why the present solution is unacceptable. I accept that there may be other ways to reach the hub, but I expect them to be a lot more expensive. I'd like to see it documented why there won't be a degradation in service quality, why there won't be degradation or safety risks of having to back up and across freight tracks, and why the technical operations won't be impaired. I also note in the proposed contract amendment, I appreciate that item has been pulled, there's no mention of ODOT. There's no mention of high-speed rail at all. Now, while some people may try to characterise this as just about high-speed rail, and I think that point's been made clear, high-speed rail is still on the table. In fact, if you read the amendment on page 11, it seems to imply that some kind of decision has been made that high-speed rail will bypass the hub. I've not heard of that. I'm not aware of that. So I'm rather sceptical about even how this contract amendment's been written. ODOT's not involved, they're not going to be invited to this parent workshop. I'm quite bemused by that. I'd like to step back a little bit and talk about the importance of preserving transport corridors and transport infrastructure. I was very happy as member of the MAPS 3 Transit Subcommittee to recommend to the MAPS Board and onto the City Council to repurchase the Santa Fe depot, something that should never have left city hands. And that's something we're going forward and we're going to have to do. I can speak to issues in other cities where poorly built terminuses have created a lot of problems operationally. As Jeff has mentioned, one of the great things is these through movements. It's much easier to get a lot more traffic through if a train dwells at the central station for a few minutes and moves straight on. We see that all of the terminuses in central London were built outside a 2 square mile area because of Victorian landowners at the time, and it's now costing billions to reconnect and create through movements. The same also happened with the Berlin Hauptbahnhof, having to recreate those through movements. And I can't overemphasize the importance of preserving critical transit corridors that will cost a lot more money to rectify mistakes. Now, I'll specifically speak to Ms Johnson's in concerns there. She seems to imply this linkage will be preserved. If so, that is a very important position statement from Cotpa, and we sincerely hope that it is the case. We've also advocated for a land swap. One of the interesting things about when this ramp is built out is it will create a triangle bounded by the railroads on all sides. And that won't be land that can be developed very easily, except for one thing. It would make an excellent area for a parking deck, and it would be in close proximity to the downtown core, and I'm fully appreciative of the need to extend parking for downtown employers. There's a win-win solution, and I can't believe for $17,000 you would be able to provide the capable, thorough, technical, and credible and transparent study that I've just said. But for $17,000, you might be able to demonstrate why a parking deck built in the middle of that triangle will work and work to the satisfaction of all parties concerned. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, I might say that, you know, this, it was just mentioned earlier, this negative impact of the IM pay plan did occur in Oklahoma City, but I think since Ron Norick initiated the original maps, this city has done a magnificent job of developing its infrastructure and developing what we have in Oklahoma City, and I couldn't be any more proud of it, and I would think, and I'm sure the City Council is continuing that train of thought in any of the development of any transportation. Also, as chairman a few years ago, I saw the need for a regional transit authority, and we began some studies on that. I think just reflects more the need for us to reopen that dialogue and develop a regional transit authority for the region of Oklahoma City. I think it's necessary if we're going to have all these options of rail and streetcar and everything in the future. So I would hope that maybe I get back on my soapbox and Larry and we try to kind of resurrect the work that we did do on the Regional Transit Authority. So I appreciate everybody's comments. I know, as Laura said, and the trust is very cognizant of all these problems. It is our fiduciary responsibility to do the best job we can, and we need information to make those decisions, and the City Council hopefully relies on some of our recommendations, and they'll make those decisions. So.
I have one question, Rick. With the study, is the intent that we would not just get back a yes or no, this works or this doesn't work, but alternatives that within that close location, because there is control issues where the city does have some property in there where a parking garage could be aligned so that it doesn't interfere with the connectivity, but still can take advantage of the proximity of the parking?
Well, essentially the focus of this was to identify, are there other alternatives to reach the Santa Fe station? And if they are, what are the positives and the negatives, and what's the cost of doing so? Pretty much as Mrs. Johnson outlined. So that information is available to the decision makers as to if parking is deemed to be important to City Council, at what cost would they be willing to impact potential rail? Or if the rail is most important, then go find another place for the parking. So that's essentially the focus of the study, is to come up with some idea of what does it really cost to do this, and make sure that we understand. And it's been verbalized this morning, a number of the issues from an operational perspective that exist when you start talking about commuter rail and interacting with freight rail, and those are the issues that ultimately the decision makers need to understand as they move forward to decide what they want to do and how to respond to this request by the public sector.
All right.
I just also want to say that I particularly appreciate and respect both your position on this and your passion for this. I appreciate your community involvement in so many, whether it's on track, whether it's the MAPS 3 subcommittees. I appreciate that very much, and I think that you are an important voice in this discussion, and I appreciate you all being here today to talk to us about this.
Thank you, Laura. And I, too, kind of reiterated that we do need input from the citizens, and you are passionate about your position on this. Having served on this trust for many years, I think I don't know about all the other trusts in the city, but I will assure you that the trustees of this trust are passionate about their job also, or we wouldn't be serving on this trust. And so we will take all these things into consideration. All right, do I have approval of our minutes of our June 14th meeting?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? All right, we are pulling two items, item E and F, on the consent docket, so that leaves us with 4 items on the consent docket, A, B, C, and D. Are there any of the particular items that any of the trustees would like discussion on?
Approval.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Items for individual consideration is a change order, number 1, to the contract with the Diversified Construction Company of Oklahoma for the Santa Fe parking garage renovation and improvements. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This change order really speaks to 3 different issues. One of them is some additional lighting. This additional lighting will be added to the courtyard area and that south passage or breezeway area that sits between the annex building on the south side and the bulk of the retail space on the north side of it. As well as doing some additional LED lighting fixtures to be installed at our portal entries to be able to better identify and make those areas stand out. The total cost of this change order is $41,755, which brings our new contract amount up to just over $2.45 million. It also extends our construction contract by a period of 30 days. We included in some of this electrical work that's doing is also kind of planning for the future. Some of this electrical work will include power to potential signage as tenants come and go from our retail space that right now, it's almost like starting over every time we get somebody in there, and so we're doing some updating and trying to make this easier so that as we have turnover, we can accommodate their individual requirements and much easier than we currently do right now. So Debbie's going to, in her presentation this morning, is going to have some updates on the construction and show you some more specifics, but for this purpose, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask your approval.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? B is a change order number 3 to McNatt for construction of the Oklahoma River Cruise Maintenance Building.
Mr. Chairman, this item, there's 4 items in it, but there's 2 of significance. One of them is an employee parking area that is being developed on the east side of on the south side of the structure. We are looking to fence that area in as much as our employees start their day early and oftentimes finish their day late at night. We just want to provide a more secure parking area for their vehicles while they're out there, and so we'll be establishing some additional fencing and gating to take that. In addition, we were initially going to install a security system but treat it separately from this construction contract. We've determined that it's probably in our best interest to go ahead and do that installation of the security system now so that we have incorporated that into this program. It wasn't that we weren't going to do one, it was just going to be done outside the bounds of the construction contract. So those are the 2 items that make up the bulk of the $23,000 plus relative to this change order. So with adding all together change orders 1, 2, and 3, we've seen an increase of just over $30,000 on this project, which is only about 4.5% of the contract. So specifically today, you're approving $23,321 of additional work, which brings our new contract amount to just over $700,000 for our maintenance facility. Excuse me, maintenance facility. And again, as in Debbie's case, Jeannie's also going to have some construction pictures to give you an update as to where we stand on this project.
All right. Do I hear a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Items C and D are approval of Cotpa's fiscal year 2014 operating budget and Cotpa's 5-year capital budget for fiscal years 2013 to 2017. The Finance Committee met yesterday and reviewed all of these and have recommended to the trust passage, but I will let Rick give a brief overview of both of the items.
I've just prepared a few slides this morning for the benefit of anybody who might be watching the meeting and for the board members. I do want to make a kind of a clarification too so that all understand how this works. The city has actually taken an action to approve the money that the city provides Cotpa for operation of the service, and so the city money that is a portion of the Cotpa budget has been approved by City Council. However, the trust has the responsibility for approving the overall budget because the budget includes much more than just city money. Although they provide over half of our operating dollars, we also get money from other sources, and I'll be talking about that in a minute as to what those other sources are. So today we're asking the trustees to approve our operating budget for the 2013-2014 fiscal year. Your action this morning will then go back to City Council as an item that they will receive so that they are aware of the action that you've taken in the overall size of the city budget. So with that, Michael, I may need your help because it just doesn't want to cooperate. This pie chart presents the total budget for the Cotpa this year, just over $33 million. Obviously, the bus transit portion is the largest segment with over $25 million, and then the respective amounts for the parking and the ferry, the Oklahoma River Cruiser operation. More specifically, Michael, if you'll move, our funding sources for parking, as has traditionally been the case, the majority of our revenues come from our monthly parkers. We did see this year an increase in transient dollars as well, but by far our largest two segments, events and then ultimately the transient function. Generally, these percentages have not changed dramatically from year to year. Right now, you know that we have an oversell situation in our garages, and so we are seeing a significant amount of monthly revenue as a result of that. Hopefully when we open our new garage, we'll see a little relief in our system, and you might see a slight shift percentage-wise, but I would not expect it to be significant. On the transit side, as I mentioned, the city provides over 50% of the funding for our bus operations. The federal balance is actually slightly lower than what it's been in the past. Generally, it's been closer to the 32% range. With what's going on in Washington right now, we see that this is going to continue to be a challenge in funding, although the authorization monies that have been set aside, or as the authorization has been set aside in bills passed, it would fund us at a higher level. The actual amount of money that's being appropriated has not exceeded or has not grown, and as such has been flat, or in some cases, depending upon the classification as to how we use the money, there's actually been a decrease in the amount of money coming from the federal government. State money, we've talked about this for a long time. It continues to be a very small percentage of our budget at only 4%. And fares, again, fluctuate anywhere from about 11 to 13 to 14% generally. Next year, we anticipate our fare structure to be at 12%. Just to kind of highlight some of the changes as it relates to our overall budget. This year, the city did request departments to take a reduction in their budget process. It was 1% for most operating departments, with the exception of public safety, who had a slightly smaller reduction in their budgets that was requested. As a result, we had to look at our service, and it was either reduce our service or increase fares. We did not want to reduce our limited amount of service that we have on the street, and so we did propose a fare increase. This fare increase would impact the single price tickets, but we did not want to adjust the pricing on our passes. The passes do offer a discount to individuals, and so it is a way that they can save money. So this fare increase represents primarily the result of the single ride cost going from $1.50 to $1.75. We did add two positions. One of the positions in the customer service area to respond to the higher demand of customer inquiries and information that we're gaining, as well as to try to focus more on our customer complaint system and response system in terms of getting back and following up on items that are brought to our attention. At the same time, in maintenance, we were also proposing a new position to help us maintain our facilities in a higher quality. You might remember, it just seems like yesterday to some of us, but it was actually almost 10 years ago that we opened the Downtown Transit Center, and with the activity that facility has, it requires more and more maintenance each year as we go in and we make upgrades to that facility to try to maintain it in a good condition, as well as just to be able to focus more attention on our other facilities as well. The technology enhancements, we've talked a lot about what we're doing to try to improve our technology with our real-time bus information. There's still some additional things that we need to do there. Probably the most significant issue that came out of this through the city process this year, the city did approve an additional $1 million to fund our transit service. This $1 million was to help support the Nelson Nygaard study. I will let you know that we did receive the final report from them on Monday. Staff is now going through that report and reviewing the final route designs has been put forth by them. We will then be looking to see if there's anything that we feel strongly that needs to be addressed, and then trying to say, okay, now how do we best allocate this $1 million to make enhancements to our system? So we will be coming back to you as the trust, and then also back to City Council with a presentation as to how this $1 million is going to be recommended that we spend. But clearly it was put out there. It's been the city's desire over the last several years to continue to try to grow our service and improve our service to the citizens. This $1 million is a significant step in that direction. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's our operating budget, unless you have any questions.
Excuse me, any questions from any of the trustees?
Especially you two, because we already heard it.
Do I hear a motion to, okay. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? All right, and then next item D is the 5-year capital budget.
Mr. Chairman, the one I really wanted to identify here and spend a little time talking about, you've got a lot of detail in your board packet that speaks to some of the items relative to transit and parking and the river, things that we hope to do, and we tried to identify those in terms of those items where we had identified funding and where we didn't have the identified funding, and that really brings us to what I think is the biggest issue that faces us over the next several years, and that's in the transit side. We have talked many times in the past about the importance of being able to replace our vehicles on a timely basis, where there was a period in our history when we were not able to do that, and we paid consequences as a result of reliability of those vehicles. Unfortunately, and this goes back to some of our federal funding issues, in the passage of the latest transportation bill, which is referred to as MAP 21, they have changed the way in which they're allocating money for bus purchases. Rather than doing it on a discretionary basis, which is for years how that was done, and when I say discretionary, that really, for many years, meant earmarks, and we were very successful in getting earmarks to help us replace our buses. When earmarks stopped, or when the pressure to eliminate earmarks came about, there was a building among some about let's just do the distribution of funds on a formula basis. And as we've talked about many times, Oklahoma City does not fare well on a formula basis because we simply don't have the population and we don't have the ridership in Oklahoma that the state, the larger cities, the East Coast cities, the West Coast cities do. And so as a result, this year and next year, as long as the MAP 21 bill is in place, we anticipate that the amount of money that we receive from the federal government for bus replacement is going to be between $700,000 and $800,000 a year. That's the equivalent of approximately 2 fixed route buses. Over the course of the next 3 years, 2 to 3 years, we actually have a requirement to replace 18 fixed route buses if we're going to do this at that 12-year increment, and then 10 paratransit vans. Those vehicles, if you add up the proposed costs on those or the estimated costs on those, is just over $7 million. So you can see there's a significant shortfall from the $700,000 to $800,000 we would get in a year's time versus the $7 million. And again, to remind people, you know, we're covering about 50,000 miles a year in our buses. We keep our buses a minimum of 12 years because we use federal funding. So at the end of that initial 12-year period, generally our vehicles have run on an average of about 600,000 miles. And you can imagine what that means in the sense of the overall condition. So being able to replace these timely is important. We were very fortunate over the last few years, once we saw the federal money and the earmark stop, that the city included us for the first time, included transit for the first time in its history, and a general obligation bond issue in 2007. We were able to use that 2007 money to buy our buses in 2009. And then we got those stimulus funds from the federal government, and we were able to use those monies. There was about $4 to $5 million of stimulus funds that went into the purchase of buses for 2011, and actually a couple of buses that we received in 2013 will have stimulus funding attached. So that helped carry us over, but the challenge is going to be as we go forward. And so right now, again, this is an unfunded need that we have. I have no easy solutions to this one. And clearly, we are not alone in this situation. We're working with APTA on a number of the transit systems within APTA. This has become one of the major legislative items for us. The thing that complicated it even further, besides this formula distribution, is the fact that because of some of the problems that got a lot of publicity on some of the rail lines in Washington, D.C. and on the East Coast and accidents that had occurred, Congress took 57% of the bus money and converted it to rail modernization programs. And so there was really a double whammy that hit us. Not only did we go to a formula basis, but they also took over half the money and allocated it to rail operations. So that is one of the legislative issues, to try to get those things back in balance, to try to address the situation that properties like ourselves have, which is we don't tend to buy 1 or 2 or 3 buses at a time. We tend to buy them in chunks where we buy 10 or maybe we buy 15. And so you need to have large sums of money at that point in time. And I honestly don't know where this will go yet, but I do know it's probably the #1 issue on the legislative agenda that we're addressing as a national association. So with that, Mr. Chairman, unless there's any questions, I'd ask approval of our capital budget for fiscal years 2013 through 2017.
All right. Any questions? If not, do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Our financial reports, I don't know any comments after having gone through the budgets, but any comments on, we're almost through the year, so.
Yeah, just a couple, and you're right. I mean, it's getting close to the end. Just a couple of things I would like to say. Under the transit budget, you do see a significant gap, negative gap there on federal grants. Part of that is we did get $600,000 in federal money in the month of May. We did not transfer that to operations at the point in time that this report was presented, so that really identifies a significant difference. And then again, it really comes down to timing as to when other money comes in. The state government subsidy, I will let you know, we did get our final state check, and as we finish the year, that budget number will come in exactly, or that number will come in exactly as budgeted. Just a comment on the supplies, and this is really a pat on the back to the budget office folks. I've been reporting as we've gone through this year how we've been doing on fuel, because that has historically been a significant item that impacts our supplies category in our budget. I will say, since I have the advantage of knowing how we ended the year as of 6/30 in our fuel purchases, that we will come in under budget, but to the credit of the budget office, our average price that we pay per gallon of fuel, we actually finished the year about 2 cents under budget on the fuel price. So kudos to them and their guesstimate as to where we were going to end up this year, because it's certainly been a volatile year. Also, I think one other comment, since I was harping so long here on the importance of replacing buses, our supplies expense also, with our newer buses in our fleet, we're seeing the advantage of having those and not spending as much in terms of repair parts and being able to take advantage of some of the warranty repair that does have to be done. So that also is a positive variance that contributes to our supplies being significantly under what was originally budgeted. Moving over to the parking side, really the only comment I want to make there, because we do have the significant positive variance right now under the expenditures on services and fees, and that is primarily two things. Number one, we are doing a good job, and I do anticipate that we will finish the year slightly under, but there's two expenses. One is the timing of the Republic invoices and payments that those have, and from a cash basis, there are going to be some bond costs, issuance costs that we will be paying out of cash. We talked a little bit yesterday in our budget meeting about how that was handled and how we paid for a number of our fees associated with the new garage and the bond sale through cash that we had. That doesn't appear on this statement, but will be appearing in June, and we'll cover that with the June statement so you can see how that was applied. And lastly, we'll talk about the river in just a minute, or for just a minute. We're going to end the year in a negative position, I believe, relative to passenger revenue. We took a significant hit this year with problems that we had with the dams on the river and our inability to run service. We will finish in a positive relative to federal grants. We did allocate some of our stimulus money for our operating money recovery related to ferry boat operation. That same maintenance recovery that we get on the transit side that you're used to talking about also applies to the ferry boats, and we were using stimulus money to do that. So we will finish in a positive relative to our federal grant draws as it relates to the river. We also, I remind you, it was last month that you authorized an increase in our spending. You authorized higher levels of spending as we were moving some of our expenses forward. So I do anticipate that we will have a negative variance as it relates to operating expenditures. But remember that you did give us that authorization so that we could advance our stimulus money spending into this fiscal year, so that we were assured that we could get ourselves reimbursed by federal money. Again, the stimulus monies will go away as of September 30th. But we are targeting to have all of our requests in the month of August so that we don't get caught in a last-minute bind in trying to get monies through the federal or through the FTA.
Okay, Marcia, I did not forget the ratification of claims or payroll. One question: Walker Parking Consultants financial analysis on the claims and payroll, was that related to the bond issue?
Yes, it was. It was part of our fiduciary responsibility to take a look at.
And just for the trust benefit, and we discussed this a little bit yesterday, what will be our total outlay that we did not, if you will, finance through the bond issue on the new parking garage?
Well, we know our, and I'm doing this off the top of my head here, but our architectural fees for the garage was about $1.2 million, I believe. That is being paid out of cash. Our bond fees, issuance fees, which was about, well, let me say this differently. The bond reserve account that has to be set up was a couple million, well, it was $1.7 million, $1.8 million, something like that, was being paid out of cash. The actual costs of construction of the garage is the only thing that we were paying through the bond sale. Okay. Everything else was being paid out of cash.
Okay. Any questions by any of the trustees on the claims and payroll? If not, we have a motion to ratify.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Thank you. Now, need a motion to approve our financial reports.
Second.
All in favor, aye. Opposed? Program reports, our transit system report.
Okay, so good morning. Pleased to share with you some of the highlights from our transit system report this morning. And we'll begin by talking about total system ridership. So if we look at ridership for the total system, that's fixed route, that's our paratransit, that's some of our special services. Through May of this fiscal year, we are seeing 2.93 million passengers year to date, which is roughly about a 0.2% increase over the first 11 months of the previous year. So the numbers are strong on the total system ridership. If you look at the fixed route, which is, of course, where the majority of our passenger trips come from, if you compare this May to May of last year, our ridership is down about 1.8%. But with that said, our average daily ridership was 9,850. And so anytime we're near that 10,000 average passengers per day, we really feel like that's pretty good for us. On the Saturday side, though, our ridership was actually up this May compared to last year. We averaged about 4,788 passenger trips on the fixed route side on Saturday. And then, again, if you look at fixed route on a cumulative basis through 11 months of this fiscal year, our ridership continues to remain strong. We're at about 2.59 million passengers through 11 months, and that's about a 1% increase over where we were at this time last year. So continuing on with ridership, talking a little bit about downtown Discovery. Last month I talked about a decline in ridership. We've been seeing, at least when you compare, this year to the same point in time last year, we've been experiencing and seeing some declines, and actually May continued that trend. In May, looking at service provided Monday through Saturday, we averaged about 206 passengers per day. That compares to 273 for that same month last year. So we're looking at, roughly a 25% decline. And last month I had mentioned that we were going to look into that, and we have actually done that. We've actually talked to some of the operators that drive that Discovery route. We've got out and looked at the route itself. We've even talked a little bit about the weather, comparing, this May to last May. We obviously had, a lot more actually bad weather. But we did notice we had some old signage that still referenced the Oklahoma Spirit, and so we're going to be looking at trying to address that. And so there are some things we found that we believe we can begin addressing to kind of eliminate some of the things from the equation, and we'll continue to monitor that. The services we provide to the elderly and disabled, that's primarily MetroLift, which is our paratransit, and then, of course, some of the special services that we provide through our meal programs and our shopping trips. Ridership for May was, again, one of the stronger months we've had this year. We actually had about 402 passengers per day in that special services area. And we are seeing, you can see actually on the third page of your transit report there, MetroLift for this year has actually experienced about a 10% increase overall in ridership. So we're seeing some more ridership in that area. Wanted to just spend a minute here talking about road calls. We measure road calls because that's kind of one of the indicators of the health of our fleet, with the thought being, if we're taking care of our buses, we're doing the maintenance like we should be able to put service out there with minimal interruption or minimal breakdowns. We're always obviously going to have some because we're dealing with equipment, but we measure that every month. For May, the miles between road calls was 12,957. Which is pretty consistent with where we've been throughout the year, but I did want to mention that if you're comparing that to May of last year, it appears we've had a substantial decline, and so I just want to real quickly show you some numbers on that, just to kind of help put that in perspective. It's really not so much of a case of this May being bad for us in terms of road calls. It's really that we're comparing to a very, very low month a year ago. In fact, last May was actually if you're looking at just mechanical failures that we have resulting in road calls, last May was the lowest month we've had actually over the last 3 years, even though I only have 2 years worth of data here. And then you can see we dropped a trend line in on this graph too, just to kind of look and say, okay, overall, looking at the last 2 years, the number of mechanical failures, what's the trend there? And so overall, it's a little bit of a decline. And then lastly, I'll just finish up by talking about preventable accidents. Again, we had a pretty good month in terms of preventable accidents. We had 2 in the month of May. And then I'll just finish up real quickly talking about some of the projects, or one of the projects that's going on over at May Avenue. It's a parking lighting and drainage improvement project. And I thought this morning I'd just share a few pictures with you in terms of what we're doing on the parking side of that, the maintenance that we're performing on the parking lot. And so what we have out there in the big parking area where we park the buses is where the joints are in the concrete. We have some deterioration, some cracking of the concrete. And here's just a picture of kind of, some of the maintenance or the crack maintenance needs that we have. Here's another picture here. You can kind of see the cracking, how it goes along that joint. And then in this picture here, you can actually see where they've come in and cut the concrete on both sides of that cracking, and they'll remove that and replace that with new. Here's a picture of, the cut and preparing for the new concrete. You can see that the new concrete, as it's going in, it's being reinforced with rebar and so forth. And then here's just a picture of kind of what that completed joint rehab looks like. And so we have this going on actually, throughout that entire large parking area where we park the buses. And then lastly, well, here's another picture of a completed repair. And then lastly, we are expanding the parking lot on the southwest side of the May Avenue facility, with over 100 operators and maintenance staff and administration. It can get a little bit crowded in terms of the parking, and so this is just a picture of the completed expansion. Still have some fencing and some stuff like that to do, but then here's another picture of it as well. So it's about maybe a little bit more than double the size of what it was. And so with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you have about the transit report.
Any questions, Jason? All right.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Larry? So
morning.
Last month, of you giving both reports, I did overlook the long-term, long-range plan, so.
Well, the long-range plan, a little bit to report there, but I'll still I'll be brief. There are a lot of public community interest in transit, and probably one of the biggest public meetings of the year would be the one coming up on Monday. On Monday night, there's a meeting in regards to presenting the 4 route options for the MAPS streetcar. And even though we could have brought those 4 route options, they're out there on the internet for people to find on the MAPS website. But on Monday night, this coming Monday, the 15th at 6 p.m., there'll be a meeting in the Ronald J. Norick Library Auditorium to present all 4 routes and to get public comment. And that public comment will be helpful. Final route recommendation is probably still probably a month away or more. In regards to the streetcar, under the Tiger II Planning Grant, we're continuing with the work on the economic assessment and trying to come up with the data that it needs to do that and to assist with the ridership projections. Health impact analysis is still underway as well. But that's not all. There are other interests in public. Rick had mentioned the transit service analysis, and the public probably doesn't realize that there won't be any kind of a change in transit service or frequency unless there is public meetings about the specific proposals. And even though there will be some of those, it won't be in the next month anyhow. That'll be further out into the future, and the public will have plenty of time to be notified of that. Under the long-range plan and the fixed guideway study, there was this recommendation for commuter rail to connect the suburbs, and that's part of what the citizens earlier were talking about, was that type of connection. Well, ACOG has really taken the lead on doing that commuter corridor study, as it's called, to link to 3 or 4 of the suburbs, and their steering committee will meet next week, and they also have in mind some community and stakeholder meetings as well. So that's all progress towards trying to achieve some of the goals of that plan. And then I guess the only other thing that I would mention is that, infrastructure, as Mr. Kane mentioned, is so very important. And the local chapter of the American Society of Civil Engineers has put together a report card on infrastructure of basically 7 or 8 different types of transportation. Cotpa staff was able to provide some information on the transit portion of that. And, they gave us a scorecard, D- for transit in the state, okay? But we were in good company along with bridges in the state getting a D-, as well as water and wastewater systems. And it's really...
That's not very encouraging, Larry. Sorry. I know you're trying to make a D- sound like not failing, but it's too close.
Well, it's true. It really is a pretty poor score, and probably others could say more about it, but really, the fact that transit finally makes the list is really kind of a great thing. And since around the same time, the Young Academy of Goals is planning on having a 3-day town hall on transit infrastructure this fall, and they're one of the state's leading think tanks, and we know that transit is one of the things that they're interested in addressing, not just roads and bridges. So really a lot of interest in things that help implement long-range plan.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you, Larry. Debbie, parking report.
Good morning. As you can see in your report, we're now at 117%. We continue to serve our customers. I'll just say that. A lot
Which,
of that,
for the record, is not a D-.
That's right. Right. I think it's A+. No, and probably the reason for that jump, if you'll look at your individual numbers, is the move from the city employees from the water lot, as we call the lot next south of us, to Sheridan Walker. And that increased that number because now we're seeing Sheridan Walker has, always been our lower as far as occupancy, and now it's up to 98%. So that's pretty much where that jump came in. Just to kind of update you on all the construction projects going on, the Arts District garage next door, they continue to drill the piers. They're also working on the elevator shafts. It's moving along. Hopefully by next meeting it'll get a little more exciting. You'll see something actually coming up. so I'm looking forward to that so I can start sharing pictures and different things that they're doing. The Sheridan Walker garage, we recently working with the Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs with the city's arts project, we have put out a call to artists on the Sheridan Walker just to kind of see what we might get with the new elementary school going in. We're looking at doing something with that concrete on that southwest side or southeast side on the corner, and just seeing what we might be able to do there to kind of brighten that up, and I'd like to hopefully do it before the Arts Festival next year, kind of play into that as well. We're also working on replacing the floor tiles and painting the lobbies and the elevators at Sheridan Walker, so you'll be seeing some improvements there as well. On the Santa Fe garage, I have pictures, if I can figure this out. Just to kind of give you an update where we are there. And I thought I'd leave this one up for just a second. This is the architect's renderings, but as Rick was saying this morning on the change order, as you can see how these are the lighting in that area, that's where the LED is kind of addressing, so people know that that's the entry to go into the elevator area. And then also the signage. This will allow any time when we have, and what we're doing, we're going to standardize the actual signing so that when tenants come in, they'll have to keep with that same type of signs, but then that will allow the electrical and everything to already be there, so then the tenant only has to provide the cost for their actual signs. Oops. How do I go to the next slide? Okay, what am I doing on here? Sorry. There we go. This is the elevator area on the south end. As you can see, remember it used to be glassed in. That's part of the renovations. That will be open. It is covered, so it does allow a little more, to be open and not so closed. They started working on replacing of the glass, and this picture is not very good up here. Hopefully, maybe I'll have it better. You can see on the left, that's the new glass going in. What we're doing is, on the one on the right is the old glass, and you can see how we're removing all this dark, the joint areas, and then also the brick. The part of the brick on the bottom was what was deteriorating, and we were having problems with that. So on the left, I think there you go. We can see that's the new look. It opens it up. It's brighter. Now these are placeholders. Those will not be there, but it will have just the thin strip of the aluminum going around, defining that as well. They've started in the courtyard so they can get the system down before we move to the tenants, because we don't want to put the tenants in any kind of, we just don't want to, mess with them as far as if we don't have to put them in any kind of distress. This is something that will be coming up probably next month, another change order that we're looking at as far as the bricks. The brick paving, this is on the north end. The brick paving, we've had some drainage issues there. There's sand underneath those bricks, so what we'll be doing is removing that and putting in the same concrete that we're putting in the other areas in front of the retail space. This is the east side, E.K. Gaylord side, and this is the new zinc paneling that's going to be going around through the front. We took off the old, it was kind of a brownish, ugly color, and now it's a zinc, all new, and then also you see the barcodes coming up. Here's a better picture of that on the east side. It will also have a portal as like the others, showing people coming down E.K. Gaylord that's where you enter into the parking garage. And this is the south side. They've started putting up the films, and as you can see, they have the shiny, the different colors. And I couldn't really get it in the camera, or as far as the photo, you really can't see the whole effect. But if you're there and you're walking from E.K. Gaylord and walking west, and you kind of look at the garage, it changes colors. Like on E.K. Gaylord, it was an orangey yellow. Then you start walking, it kind of turns pink, and then it's a blue and green. So it's going to look really cool once they get all up and the different, the way the sun hits it. And then this is, for example, this was kind of looking at it right head on. And then I went on farther west and kind of looked at it at a different angle. So you can kind of see. And then at night, we'll also have the lights coming down, which will also affect the different colors and things like that. So, and basically, that's where we are at Santa Fe.
Is all the construction completed in the parking part of Santa Fe?
Yes, that was all completed.
Places are open and.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right now, basically, it's just all working on the exterior and the facade and different things like that.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. One more thing. If you'll notice, Miles Terry, the general manager for Republic, has left. He's headed up north to do their on-street meter for, I forgot, was it Scranton? Yeah. And so I'd like to introduce, this is Joe McKibben. He's the new general manager with Republic. And then also with him is Kim Dockery. She's the operations manager. So for those of you that saw the faces and wondered who they were.
Thank you. All right, our marketing.
Good morning. Just a couple of quick items. Next Friday will be our third Friday free for the month of July. We'd like to encourage as many people to come out and ride, and I'll also ask you to join us sometime. We have seen a tremendous response because each year that we've done this program, we've seen an increase in the ridership for each month as compared to the year before, and this year is no different. And so while our ridership trends may have changed a little this last year overall, these days still continue to perform very well. and continue to receive quite a bit of feedback from the general public and a lot of support through social media in sharing and encouraging others to use this as an opportunity to learn about public transit. One of the other areas, again, that we're focusing on over the next couple of months is our customer relations and finding a system to and getting that in place so that we can better respond to our customers' inquiries. And of course, that is a lot of that is tied to technology, and so that is something that takes a little time to determine what is the best solution. At the same time, not sacrificing any of the support that we currently provide to our customers. If you will notice in your report, we continue to see an increase, however, in our calls that we receive. Jason mentioned earlier about our Metro Lift, a tremendous increase, really, for the amount of rides provided there. That correlates also, though, with a 24% increase in the phone calls that they're receiving over the year prior. Again, there's a lot of demand for a service, and that's much like what we've experienced with our fixed route side with a 17% increase. So we're looking at how can we continue to serve our customers but be even more efficient so that we can handle the amount of call volume with what we have and then project for what we'll need in the future. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Some years ago, APTA had ads that we could kind of tie into, and I noticed we ran some then. Has that kind of stopped the coordinating advertising effort with APTA for local?
I monitor that very closely and participate on their committee. The challenge that we have recently is with the messaging with their ads are more about the industry right now and how do they support jobs within local communities. And so for those areas of the country that have either the bus manufacturer or the seat manufacturer, they talk about how public transit provides jobs in that way. So right now, that is the core of their advertising message.
All right. All right. Thank you. All right, Jeannie?
A lot of presentations today. Well, as you can see from the ridership report, we have took a big hit again with weather and with dam issues. We dodged a bullet Wednesday with another dam failure, but the Public Works responded very quickly. We lost very little water. We're not. I know. I can't help it that the dam gates fail. Anyway, the Public Works went ahead and shored up the other gate that has not yet failed, so that if there is a hydraulic issue there, it will not affect us. And then this Tuesday at City Council, they'll be approving a contract to give us a more permanent solution to some of the issues that we've been having with the dams. Other than that, things have been going pretty well. If we can just hang on to our service, we'll be in good shape. I wanted to show you a little bit about our maintenance facility. You approved a change order today to help us out. This picture on the left, of course, they're getting ready to pour the concrete for the drive to go in. And then on the right shows some of the finished electrical work that's getting ready to be hooked up. That's the west doors, the river side, or the inlet side. This is the north side. There's some stairs going up to the mezzanine. That was the required fire escape from the mezzanine level. The sidewalk that we're having put in, we had a little bit of delay in our project coming up with a ADA grade sidewalk to go from that door over to that sidewalk. That issue has been resolved, and we should start pouring concrete, if not this afternoon, then on Monday. Very excited about being able to move forward. Once that concrete is poured, the building can be secured, then we can begin putting in flooring, ceilings, and cabinetry and so forth. Here's some of the interior that's finished. It's a shower on the right, and then on the left is the workroom where the deckhands will prepare materials for the boats. This is the stairway on the inside of the warehouse area. The offices are behind that wall. The To this side of the stairway, of course, is the main bay area where we would put a boat. You notice the stairway doesn't go completely to the top of the mezzanine until you get all the way to the other end. This is designed so that when there's a boat in that bay, that this mezzanine level meets the deck level of the river cruiser so that a worker could easily transition from that level to the boat to do some work. And then I took a small picture of the fire alarm system that is going in. It looks very sophisticated. Very happy about that. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Just don't let the dams keep failing. That's
Absolutely,
all
yeah.
right. All right, thank you. Do I hear a motion to receive our program reports? All in favor? It's been kind of a lengthy meeting, so any items from the trustees, please make it brief, but no. No, okay. Arnie?
I've been warned.
I tried to warn Rick, but I bet he's got something to say.
I'll say one thing. And that is just to make sure everybody is aware, we did get confirmation last week that the triennial inspection that we do every 3 years, FTA will be back this year in November to do that. And again, that is a very comprehensive examination of our system and our activities. It includes things like finance and procurement, and they talk about ADA and safety and security. They'll also talk about drug-free workplace. So, I mean, it's a very extensive review that is made, and so as we move forward, we will be getting review requests from them. They'll do a lot of desk audits this year. A lot of this will be done before they actually get on site, so that when they get on site, they've got very specific things they want to look at over the course of 2 days. And obviously, when the report is complete, then you will get copies of that report as we have traditionally done in the past. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Well, I guess we have a meeting 3 weeks?
3 weeks,
so-
yeah.
All right, thank you.